I am live on this Sunday morning. If you're catching this in the archive, as most of you will, make sure to do me a favor, hit that sub button, hit the like button as well. Leave your comments below on how you scored the fight, how you saw the fight playing out, and comment on other topics that you're going to hear as I go through this video. And I wanted to do a 15-minute video on this. I'll talk about Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez later. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that. But to me, the highlight of the night last night, as I had time to reflect on it, and as you hear my dog bark in the background, was Taylor Serrano, the fight, the atmosphere, the environment, and a lot of topics that come from it, that stem from it. Topics that I've talked about in the past, as far as 10-8 rounds when a fighter hasn't gone down. Should women's boxing go from 2-minute to 3-minute rounds? And I wanted to reflect on that and comment on some of those things in this video. Scoring. This was the first 2-minute round that I've had to score, that I've scored in my life. And I've been following boxing for decades. And I've never scored a 2-minute round before. Scored a 2-minute round. Scored a fight with 2-minute rounds. So it was difficult when you have a lot of swing rounds and you have 3-minute rounds. It's easier for a fighter to develop their identity in a round when it's a 3-minute round. It's easier for a fighter to develop their identity over 36 minutes as opposed to 20 minutes. So I didn't know how I was going to feel about that. And I found it tougher to score the 2-minute rounds, 2-minute swing rounds than the 3-minute swing rounds. This was a tough fight to score. And that's why I said after I had the fight 96-94 for Katie Taylor at the end of the day. But if you flip that and had a 96-94 Serrano, I wasn't going to argue you down at all, because there were 4 or 5 swing rounds in this fight that could have flipped either way. So even 96-93, 97-93 for Taylor, I wasn't really mad about, because if you gave the benefit of the doubt for Katie Taylor in every round, I felt like you could get there, but you had to give her the benefit of the doubt in every round. I just felt 96-94 either way was the sweet spot in this fight, but it was difficult to score this fight. A lot of swing rounds in 2 minutes. It's tough. It's tough to score a swing round when you have 2 minutes to judge what each fighter is doing. But coming in, I didn't know what to expect. And that's why I told D-Style when we were doing the preview last week, I said, I'm going to lean on you heavy when it comes to this fight, because he's more educated on women's boxing. I am very much a casual observer of women's boxing, so I didn't know what to expect. I picked Katie Taylor. I bet on Katie Taylor. I parlayed Katie Taylor by decision with Shakur Stevenson by decision, and ended up working out for me. But that's based off of a couple hours of doing film study on both fighters. So what I noticed immediately was the environment lived up to the hype. I mean, that place was loud, and you heard it right away through the screen. And a lot of fights, when the undercard is on, there are a lot of empty seats, and that wasn't the case. I mean, 2 fights before the main event, you saw the place was pretty much packed, and the environment was, I mean, you could hear it. And then you notice right away as these 2 fighters are eyeing each other up before the fight, that it's about to be fireworks. And right away, it lived up to the hype, because D-Style was telling me last week it's going to be a great fight. And as a boxing fan, you're jaded, right? You're like, yeah, great fight. You're used to big fights not living up to the hype, but this one did. It had everything. It had great technical fighting. It had entertainment. It had the fireworks. It had a fighter getting hurt. It had a fighter coming back from getting hurt and trying to navigate that. It had a close fight. It had and now we have a rivalry. And I said last year around this time, the 2 things that female fighting needs to have in order to take that next step is 1, more knockouts, and 2, rivalries. They've solved the rivalry problem with Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, and now you're going to have Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields. You're starting to have organic rivalries start to bubble up. And pay attention to that word, organic. This isn't being forced, right? Boxing is doing a great job of subsidizing female boxing, which it needs to be subsidized in order to get the exposure that it needs in order to take that next step, but it's organic growth at the same time. And that's important. It can't be shoved down people's throats. It has to organically build. And we're starting to organically get these rivalries, organically get fights that are great with great atmospheres because it's organic growth. It's real. It's real. And this was a real fight. This was a real fight. I had Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano through 4 rounds even. Let me get to some comments. Shout out to JC in the building. I agree after every round. I was like, damn, it's already over. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. 2 minutes versus 3 minutes round, 3 minute rounds. I'm not going to have time to drop the link. I will drop the link for Shakur Stevenson. I'm going to do a 15, 20 minute video. I got to get to church service, but I wanted to drop this and get my thoughts out while it's still fresh in my mind. But I had it even through 4. And then the 5th round happened. And Chris Mannix is so terrible. And they need to stop having him as the official scorecard, unofficial scorecard guy, because he's just not good at scoring fights, but also he's not good at giving fighter advice. He was saying that Katie Taylor has to trade with Amanda Serrano. And then the very next round, Katie Taylor, the 5th round, goes in there and trades with Amanda Serrano inexplicably, the bigger puncher, and it didn't turn out well for her. The 5th round was heavy Amanda Serrano. And that brings me up to one topic that I want to touch on. 10-8 rounds when a fighter doesn't go down. I've always been of the thought that I don't like scoring around 10-8 when a fighter isn't dropped. To me, even if you get hurt, even if you get rocked multiple times, and you're on Queer Street the whole round, if you stay on your feet, you earned your 9. That's always how I felt. He or she earns their 9 if they stay on their feet for the whole round. So I don't like scoring 10-8 rounds when a fighter is hurt, rocked multiple times if they don't go down. If they didn't touch the canvas, they earned their 9, in my opinion. I saw a 10-8 round for Amanda Serrano in that 5th round. I just don't like it. I've never been a fan of that. I've never been a fan of 10-8 rounds when a fighter doesn't go down. If you don't touch the canvas, you earned your 9. That's my opinion on that. So I scored the 5th for Amanda Serrano, but this is where the fight turns great. Is 6, 7, 8. I score for Katie Taylor. 6th round, as they're talking about Amanda Serrano easily winning the fight and she's roughing up Katie Taylor, I felt like Katie Taylor had a good round in round 6, coming back from being dropped in the 5th round. Felt like she had a great round. And it was another great round. And 7 and 8, she wins, in my opinion. Amanda Serrano comes back in the 9th round, wins 10-9. So at that point on my scorecard, it's up in the air because I have Katie Taylor 5-4 going into the 10th round. And then all 3 judges had the 10th round for Katie Taylor. I felt like Katie Taylor really dug deep in that 10th round. And she started to trade with Serrano because she felt like she had 2 minutes to close the show. I feel like both fighters felt like they had to close the show. This is a close fight. And Katie Taylor, I felt, closed the show. I just think she was better in the exchanges in that 10th round and won the fight 6-4 on my scorecard. One thing that I don't like, and I saw Jake Paul do it on Twitter last night, is you never try to justify your fighter winning the fight based off of overall CompuBox stats. He put out a stat last night that Amanda Serrano landed 147, I believe, as opposed to 133 for Katie Taylor, which is 14 punches over 10 rounds. So you're talking about maybe a little over 1 punch per round on average. But the problem with that overall is even if it's more than that, you're judging 10 separate fights is what you're doing. So you can't use the overall CompuBox stat. And CompuBox is flawed to begin with, but even if we say it's accurate, you can't take the overall stat. You have to take it round per round. It's 10 different rounds that you're judging. And I felt like over the rounds that Serrano won on my scorecard, the 4, were definitely Serrano rounds. She was winning them wide, but there's no carryover effect when you're scoring a fight. And that's why I don't like comparison rounds. We saw one with Valdez against Stevenson last night. I only gave Valdez 1 round, But there was a round later in the fight where Valdez did good as compared to previous rounds. The problem with comparison rounds is you're judging them and comparing them with previous rounds. You have to wash away the previous rounds like they never happened when you're scoring that round. That's how you get comparison rounds. There's no carryover. You're scoring 10 different fights. And when men's boxing, you're scoring 12 different fights. Look at each round as a different fight. And when you do that, you had Serrano. If you take away the rounds and you score it as one big fight, you might have said Serrano looked like she beat up Katie Taylor a little bit, and I would pick her. And that's where casual fans get it mixed up sometimes. You watch a fight with a casual fan, and they're like, I felt like that person won the fight. Yeah, but you didn't score it round by round. I watched you. You didn't score it round by round. If you watched the fight last night, Serrano won 4 rounds clearly. The rounds that Taylor was winning were all close. I felt like there were the DAZN commentators. I think they did a bad job, as did the ESPN commentators last night with Stevenson and Valdez. And we'll talk about that later. But what they were missing is when Serrano was landing left hands, Katie Taylor was also landing big right hooks on her way out. She was doing good boxing work, good technical work, good footwork. And Serrano, just a big puncher. It's ironic that she's supposed to be the smaller fighter because she looked physical. And she was walking Katie Taylor down, and she is a physical fighter. She was landing some hellacious shots, and Katie Taylor was walking through them, to her credit, and landing big shots of her own. It just felt like Serrano's punches had more on them, had more effect. But Taylor, the round she was winning, she was landing more shots, and she was doing good boxing work in the meantime. But I wanted to get to 2 to 3 minute rounds, that topic, because I had a change of heart after watching this fight last night on that. Let's see. Marion Brown I scored a 10-8 because Katie Taylor was hurt almost the whole round. And yeah, we'll have a difference of opinion on that. And most people agree with you than agree with me. I just always feel like if a fighter did not touch the canvas, they earn their 9. I don't care if they get rocked up and down the ring for 2 minutes, 3 minutes straight. If they stay on their feet, on my scorecard, they earn their 9. That's how I feel. Taylor won that fight, much cleaner work, most rounds by the end. Taylor had her figured out. Now, I don't know if she had her figured out, but she was doing good work that was going unnoticed by the DAZN commentators. She was doing some clean boxing work in there against a bigger puncher. Yes, Serrano was imposing her will at times. Serrano, the round she was winning bigger, landing the bigger shots. But I just think that Katie Taylor was doing some clean, effective work in there for a lot of the fight. And you're right about that. Respect to the chat. Shout out Long Live Boxing. Made her miss all night and eating counters. Taylor won fair and square. Great fight, though. And I wanted to touch on 2 versus 3 minutes rounds because I've been saying leading up to this, female boxing needs more knockouts. And if you go to 3 minute rounds, you'll get the more knockouts. I'm not so sure about that now. And yes, if this were a 3 minute round fight last night, a 30-minute fight, I don't know if Taylor survives. If that was a 3 minute round in the 5th round, I don't know if Katie Taylor survives that round as opposed to a 2 minute round. But to play the devil's advocate, and I think I had a change of heart last night, is I even said on Twitter after the fight, do a rematch and do it with 3 minute rounds. But as I had more time to reflect on this, and this is why I like to do these things the day after, sleep on it. I think the female boxers should stick to 2 minute rounds. And think about it. Female tennis, 3 sets, male tennis, 5 sets. It's about 60% of the length of a male fight, a male tennis match. Same thing with female boxing is 20 minutes as opposed to 36 minutes. That's how long a fight lasts in comparison. So you're looking at about 55% the length of a men's boxing match. The reason I'm starting to think this way is after watching the fight last night, what I loved about the fight last night was it was nonstop action from the jump. From the jump. Both ladies went in there with bad intentions and say, I'm going to try to impose my will, impose my identity on the other fighter. I don't have much time to do it, so I'm going to do it. I have 2 minutes per round to try to impose my will, my identity on this round. I'm going to do it. So if we had 3-minute rounds for the fight last night, would we have had both fighters come out as aggressive as they were? Or would we have had Taylor and Serrano come out and say, you know what? I'm going to leave some stuff in the gas right now for later on in the fight because I know I have to have some reserves for later on in the fight. What I liked about last night was it was nonstop action and fireworks from the beginning. So we look for separation. We look for uniqueness as opposed to women's boxing to men's boxing. And I think that's something that can be unique in women's boxing and we even saw it in the fight that was 2 fights prior for Undisputed in the female fight, is there was nonstop action from the jump. So, and they were throwing power punches the whole fight, like nonstop power punches. And the same thing in the main event, you had beautiful boxing, but you had a bunch of power shots being thrown. And I think a lot of that has to do with the 2-minute rounds. They know they don't have to leave stuff in the tank for later on in the fight. Right. So I think that's something that can be unique to women's boxing is the action of it. Because you have to have something unique. You don't want women's boxing to just be a watered down version of men's boxing. You want something that's unique to men's boxing, a women's boxing, as opposed to men's boxing. So the nonstop action part of it could be unique. We have 20 minutes to fight. Let's fight. That's what I liked about last night. It was just from the jump, both fighters said, I'm going in there and I'm fighting. And I think that has a lot to do with, I don't have to save my energy for later in the fight. I was in the building. It was electric. What a fight. Need to see part 2. And yeah, it seems like part 2 will be over there in Ireland for Katie Taylor. From what I saw, Katie's punches had no effect. She was boxing well and moving well, but Serrano walked straight through it and landed the harder punches. And that's the case for Serrano that I'm seeing from people. And it's fair. Like I said, man, there were a lot of swing rounds. It was tough to score. And the 2-minute round aspect of it has a lot to do with that as well. It's just tough when you're scoring 3-minute rounds, swing rounds. So when you have 2-minute round swing rounds and you have punches being thrown back and forth, and you only have 2 minutes to figure out who is the better fighter off of the boxing official boxing criteria, it's tough. It's tough, and that's why I'm not critical of a lot of the scorecards. The Mannix scorecard I'm critical of because I felt like he wasn't giving Katie Taylor any credit for what she was doing early in the fight. But the people who had it close either way, 6-4, 6-4 either way, I can't be critical of any of that. So if you felt like Serrano was landing the more effective shots, was the aggressor, like the shots that Katie Taylor was landing didn't have as much effect on Serrano, and that's why you gave the fight to Serrano, it's a level-headed take. It just is. I can't argue with that at all. I had Serrano winning 6-4. Serrano was causing more damage. Taylor was boxing beautiful and had amazing footwork, but I'm good with the decision. That's how I feel too. Like I favored Taylor's boxing ability, and I thought that her shots had more effect than they were given credit for in the round she was winning. And proof of that I felt was Serrano not being as aggressive in those rounds that I felt like she was losing as she was in the rounds that she was winning heavily, because she won 4 rounds heavily, especially that 5th round. I had, let's see, that fight flew by. I left wanting more. And that's the thing too, like it flew by. It flew by. And pay attention to what you just said. It left me wanting more. That's what I'm saying. It left me wanting more too. It left me wanting a rematch. It left me wanting to watch more of Katie Taylor no matter who she fights. It left me wanting to see Amanda Serrano more no matter who she fights. And this isn't virtue signaling. Like I said, I keep throwing out that word organic. It's organic to me. That was good action. It was a good action last night. I mean, I was pleased. I was impressed. I got what I wanted. There's no, I mean, I was happy. I was happy with that fight. It lived up to the expectations that everybody was telling me. I'm very much a casual when it comes to women's boxing. I am, and that's why I didn't talk about this fight much. I didn't want to be one of those people. I'm always afraid to be one of those people that, the people who the people who know the least know it the loudest. You see the casual boxing fans with the YouTube channels, and they revert to name calling and race baiting on here because they don't know what they're talking about and they feel like they need a voice. I didn't want to be one of those people who just talked about something that I just wasn't as educated as a lot of other guys on here when it comes to this topic. But this fight last night had me rethinking things, especially when it comes to 2-minute rounds as opposed to 3-minute rounds, and other things. And it had me wanting more is the key. And I think that's another case for the 2-minute rounds is it has you wanting more because it's going to lead to more action. And I had a change of thought last night. Like I had a change of opinion, and great fights do that for you, right? Like great books, you read a great book and it makes you rethink things. You watch a great documentary, it makes you rethink things. And that fight last night made me rethink, like, I don't know if I want 3-minute rounds for female fighters. And it's not that I don't think they're capable. I just think it might water down the content. It might take away something that's unique to female fighting. The shorter fights lead to more action. Those two fighters went in there last night and said, I got 20 minutes. I got 20 minutes to do what I need to do. Not, I have 36 minutes, so let me go in there and try to save some energy for later on in the fight. So there was less of a chess match, more of a fight. And I enjoyed the hell out of it. A lot of Katie's punches were get off me type punches. Yeah, I mean that's fair. It's fair. I just felt like she wasn't getting enough credit for the hook she was landing. She was landing a lot of great right hooks in those exchanges and then rolling off of them and ending the exchanges. And I think that's important. She was ending a lot of the exchanges in the 6 rounds. I felt she won. And there were close rounds. Like pretty much all the 6 rounds I had Katie Taylor winning. I had her winning close. The 4 rounds that I had Serrano winning, she won decisively, but there's no carryover effect. That's why I don't like comparison rounds. You shouldn't be comparing round 7 to round 6. And you shouldn't be using the momentum of round 5 to round 6 as a carryover to round 6. And I felt like that's what the zone commentators were doing. They were talking about so much of round 5 that they forgot, and they weren't seeing that Katie Taylor was doing the better work in round 6. And I had Katie Taylor winning round 6. So that's just my thoughts on last night, how I felt it played out. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're tuning in on the archives, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe as well. And more on Valdez versus Stevenson later on. God bless. Y'all have